All right, so drawing faces are really tricky. And what makes drawing faces tricky is that we have a real sense of what a face should look like, right? When a face isn't quite right, immediately we're like, wow, that guy's making a strange expression. Like, this didn't turn out the way I expected it to, because we have so much sort of psychological energy directed towards faces and looking at faces and understanding faces. Like, maybe part of the reason why we have such large brains in the first place is help us differentiate subtle differences in faces, right? Like, this is like one of the things that like humans specialize in to a really incredible extent. So looking at faces is very, very important to us. And so we immediately notice when something is wrong, we second guess it, we have an idea of what it should look like. And a lot of those ideas are mental, like they're in your head and they're not in your eye. And so we want to actually sort of dispel a little bit of that. And we'll talk about some standard things that happen based on some standard faces. So we're going to go through some standard qualities of faces. We'll walk you through it. And the way the light hits the face, depending on like the shape and like contour of those faces. Like, so there are some standard things that most faces share, like the proportions and stuff like that. And you can use these tools to apply them onto what you're seeing. But keep in mind that faces are all different, right? Some people have longer noses, some people have a higher hairline like me, or a lower hairline. It just depends on the person. So all of that good stuff. Some of the proportions of the face, right? So one of the things that we noticed about the skull is that the skull could be simplified down to some specific shapes and specific proportions. And the skin goes over the skull and is sort of beholden to those same proportions. And one of those proportions that is, I think, really tricky for students is the placement of the eyes. Okay, so when you're looking at a person straight on, right? And I'll go ahead and spot my video here so you can see my big old face. Here we go. You're looking at my face. Figure A, standard face. And you want to figure out where the eyes are. So I have a little ruler here, and I'm going to just hold the ruler up, and I'm going to figure out, okay, so this is where my eye level is, right? It's exactly 4 inches. All right, that's helpful. Then I bring it down. And you can see that it's exactly the same. If I'm lining it up with the eyes, here is down to the chin, 4 inches. The eyes are in the middle of the face. All right. Another thing that's really helpful to know is if I line up here, I'll take my glass. Oh, I can't see anything without my glasses on. If you line up the pupil straight down, it roughly lines up with the corner of the mouth. Well, if I can get my ruler correctly. Sorry. So this usually tends to go straight down, and I'm trying to get my angle right here, but roughly straight down is the corner of the mouth. Now, mouths come in different sizes, but that's like a good guide, right? So like if you're coming down from the pupils down to the corner of the mouth, it's roughly directly visually below that, okay? If I was going to figure out the width of my eyes, excuse me, I'm going to figure out the width of my eye. So I'll take my glasses off for this. So here is, and I'm trying not to poke my eye out with this one. So I have like my eye here, but there should be enough room for a third eye exactly between the two eyes, and a fourth eye off to the side and a fifth eye off to the other side. That's kind of, it starts to taper back, but the sort of visual width here is about the width of another eye. So like if you're trying to figure out the width of your eye, it's about 1/5 of the way across your face. Excellent. Another thing is a placement of the lips and the end of the nose, right? So when you're dividing up the face, this is like, think about where these lines are in relationship to the length of the chin, right? So we'll talk about that too. Yes. All right. So those are like the main things. Like, I think that what happens is when we're looking at a face, so say I've got like a hat on or whatever, I've got more hair. We tend to look at this part of the face, right? And so we think that the eyes are higher on the head because we're looking at the face and not the whole head, right? But there is more up here. There's like, and depending on how floofy your hair is or how low your hairline, some of this area can be a little bit concealed, right? But when you're taking into account the entire head, that's when that middle point really matters. But when you're looking at the face, you know, that's where that optical illusion happens, where you think the eyes exist higher. Because when you're just looking at the face, and this is the part that's important to you, right? Well, then of course the eyes are higher, right? So that's the difference between looking at the whole head and just the face. So I'm going to switch to my top-down camera. How is this? Is this lighting better, you guys? I think it is. I think we've actually upgraded. Yes. Yes, there we go. All right. So you may have seen a face, a standard face. And these are sort of the problems that I notice when I'm working with students, right? And this is it's like getting in my left-hand way. All right, scooch over a bit. Some of the problems that I see when people are starting out drawing faces is that they end up doing these sort of stylized qualities. There's these sort of stylized elements here. And so one of the things that I notice people do is they'll draw big dark lines around your eyes. So here's some eyes. These are things that we're not going to do. All right. So this is the no face. So they'll draw big outlines around the eyes, you know, some pupils. Now, maybe they'll draw really big, prominent Minnie Mouse eyelashes, right? We see a little bit of that. Sometimes we'll see this kind of nose, right? We'll see a sort of nose like this. Maybe some of you are laughing because you've seen faces like this before. Or maybe you'll bring it up here for your eyebrow. And then the other thing that I'll see a mouth. A mouth that looks like this, right? Big dark outline around the mouth. Here we go. So here's our face. This is our. Another thing that I've noticed students have trouble with is the head and shoulders. So like the face is not floating in space. And so depending on how they're sitting, right, you might actually see the shoulders closer to the face. So just because you're looking at the face, don't just put the face on a little giraffe neck and be like, that's how it is. Like, let me switch to my top up camera here. These are things to be aware of and notice if they start happening for you. So when you look at me sitting here, right? You know, Picasso spent a lot of time drawing realistic faces before he could get a beautiful, like symbolic face. Like we understand it's symbolic, but like some of these symbols are pulling from real things. And so we're going to kind of push past some of the flatness. And then if you end up in your own work going towards a more stylized path, at least you'll have a sense that it's based on a reality and a stylization of reality. So if you're looking at me, right, you don't necessarily see me sitting like this, right? Unless I'm leaning forward, right? So when I'm sitting up like this, you see my neck, but when I'm leaning forward like this, and maybe I'm drawing, what you actually see is my shirt actually touching my chin, right? This line here is right there at my cheek, right? You don't see the full length of the neck. Or maybe you're wearing a big hoodie and that like kind of bumbles up closer to your face, right? So don't just put like a little giraffe neck on top of your figure unless you see one, okay? So that's one thing to be aware of, right? So like if we were looking at me, kind of like my neck came here, right? So this is how I was actually sitting, whereas I feel like students tend to go like this, right? So another thing that comes up here, we'll give her some ears. She's beautiful, you guys. Another thing that comes up is talking about hair, right? So we draw hair. Hair is made up of little strands. Yeah, lots of little hairs, right? And so people will try to draw hairs. Like they're gonna be like this, right? I see. And the truth is that for the most part, you don't actually see individual hairs. Like you actually see hair as a shape instead of an individual hair. And I'm actually going to feature somebody. Tyler, are you down for us to admire your hair for a moment? Here, Tyler, you have great hair this morning. I'm going to spotlight you for a second. So we're looking at Tyler's hair. And you look at the hair, we don't actually see strands of hair, right? We see mostly a shape. Very good. No, it's good. It's good. Now we can see your neck. It's beautiful. So we can see the shape that your hair makes. And the only part where we actually see any strands of hair is when it breaks off the sort of block of the shape, right? Like on the side here, right near your ear, it kind of curls up a little bit. So we see a little bit of the hairs there, like maybe we see some sort of curls coming out, some locks. But for the most part, as it goes over your head, I just see a shape of it, right? Thank you, Tyler. Now this is like easier for some people than others to notice when your hair is doing a shape. I have a student with an excellent afro in my other class, and his hair, you can't confuse it for little strands. It is a shape, and you're going to draw it as a shape no matter what you try, you know. And I think that's really helpful because it is actually really helpful to think of the hair as a shape. So I'm actually going to take this face, and we're going to talk about some of these things that we can do for it. Here's a little. So I drew this face. I think maybe I did a prettier face, but I drew this face in my my Monday class. And we're going to talk about the transformation between this half and this half of the face. This is the same face. It's the same girl, right? Like I didn't do anything. I didn't erase the proportions. I didn't move anything around. Here she is. This is her girl, right? You know, that same girl. So we're going to talk about bringing out a little bit more of those three-dimensional qualities here. So buckle up. So let's talk about the eye, right? Everyone loves the eye. So imagine this is a girl. We have a light coming in from above, right? So generally speaking, unless you're telling ghost stories with a little flashlight under your face, you know, you have an upward light source, right? So the sun is above you, the light generally hits you from above. So keeping that in mind, we're going to kind of use that as our default. Top lighting is standard for seeing the face. And let's go take it over here. Maybe I'll just turn this. There we go. Oh, I don't like that. I'll just move my camera on top of her. Beautiful. All right. So say we're looking at the eye. Now we love the eye. Everyone loves to draw the eye. It's actually kind of like an art student like inside joke because like everyone wants to make a giant eyeballs. This is like art school. So, but we know that we've been looking at the skull and the eye. Underneath the eye, we have the actual eyeball. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw the eyeball here, right? So we have our eyeball. It's actually a sphere. And on that sphere, you might have an iris, a pupil, right? So here, let's go ahead and give ourselves a little bit of eyeball. This is looking like an eyeball, right? If I can draw the circles correctly, that's good enough. We'll take it, right? It's a little lumpy. I think he might have astigmatism, this eye, you know, like that's when your eyeball is like not perfectly round, right? And so then you have issues anyhow. You need glasses. But the eyelid is stretched over the surface of the eye. So depending on the angle, so I drew this eye kind of at an angle here. So let's see, the eyelid is actually comes across. And then it comes across the bottom. And so this round curve of the eyelid is curved because it's stretched over the eye. So that almond shape is actually just the skin going over that eyelid and down below. All right. Now notice that when you're looking at your eye, that it's very infrequently that you'll see the full round of the iris, right? So I'll switch back to my face here. You're looking at my eye. I can't see anything, you guys. I'm just going to assume that it looks right. When you look at my eye, you can actually see that you don't see the full round, depending on the angle. But generally speaking, your eyelid crosses through that iris, right? And so you can see that depending on how open the eye, but unless you're like, and that's not a very relaxed position to make a drawing. So generally speaking, people are not holding their eyes fully open. Generally speaking, the eyelid crosses on top of the iris. So just, I don't want to see the full round of your iris. And if you do draw the full round of the iris, it may be that you made your iris too small. So just notice that too. So switch back to my top-down camera here. Okay, so noticing that the this lid is wrapped around, Another thing that I wanted to point out to you is that I drew this line here really, really dark. And unless you are wearing extremely intense eyeliner, we do not generally see the lid as intensely dark, right? And so I think it's really helpful to sort of just notice where things are dark and where they are less dark, right? So I'm actually lightening up the lid a little bit. The other thing that comes up in these classes, so here we go. Let's get this light source here. So just like before, this is this eye. So the light source is coming from this way above, right? And we have, it's not just the eye itself, but it's the skin around it. But so we see here that this part of the eye is sort of around part of that sphere. And so the light lands on it. But right above it, where you have the brow, right? This area kind of dips in, is actually in deeper shadow. So you want to think about the skin around the face. So one of the things you're going to notice here is that even with someone who has a pale face, yours truly, even with someone with a light complexion, the skin is not paper white, and it's really important to lay down some of that tone on that face, and that will allow you to put in highlights. Same with below the eye. So generally speaking, below the eye, you might have a little bit of a darker shadow, right? And that shadow would follow the contour of the eye, right? Now, maybe you're wearing a little bit of concealer, it's a little bit less prominent, but part of that shadow under your eye is not just because you're tired, it's actually because the shape of the eye and the face, right? And so you just want to think about that as we're doing this. Now, another thing to think about, I'll give a little tear duct here, is that the eye, when you look at someone's eyelashes, right? When you're looking at my eyelashes or anybody's eyelashes, even if they're wearing humongous false eyelashes, generally speaking, you cannot see the individual hairs like this. You actually see instead more like a dark line, right? You don't see like big chunkin hairs. So I don't want to actually see any of you guys drawing big chunkin eyelashes, right? Like if there are eyelashes, it's really more of like a dark edge, primarily along the top edge of the eyelash. The other thing to keep in mind here is that the eyelashes and the thickness of the lid cast a slight shadow on the eye itself. And even the white of your eye is not exactly bright white. It's not paper white. It's actually a really, really light gray. And so those are all things to be aware of. So remember, the eye is wrapped around the circle. Don't give me individual eyelashes. Don't give me a big old open iris, you know. Just keep in mind that edge. Sometimes you might see, like the eyelid itself has a little bit of thickness to it. And so sometimes you might see a little bit of that inner line. You might see a double line along the bottom. So that is the eye. So let's apply that to our girl. Let's do it. Let me just smear her up a little bit. So let's make this her good side, and this will be her bad side, right? What do you think? All right, so if I was going to apply this rule onto her eye, right, I'm going to keep everything kind of the same proportions, but knowing that her eye is about here and that the eyelid kind of comes in front of it, immediately we can start giving her a little bit more depth, right? Immediately we can start noticing where those highlights and shadows land, right? So we have a deeper shadow above her eye. This is in the round. We have another shadow that's underneath her eye. Right here is a cheekbone. This is a little bit higher. So you can see immediately how we can start to kind of improve her. I think I've made her eye a little bit too big. All right, so we'll move on to the next thing. We'll kind of keep it going here. Stretched over that circle. All right. So another thing that comes up is the nose. All right. So we have our nose, and you might think about the nose having kind of like these edges, but the truth is that when you look at a nose, it doesn't really have a hard, sharp edge along the parallel. It's actually really soft, and it's important to kind of render it soft to make it look three-dimensional. Now it does kind of darken at the bottom here, right? So the nose does get a little bit darker at the bottom. So let's go ahead and lay out a nose. All right, so we have our nose, and one of the things that you do see when you're looking at a nose, and let me switch to my face. I'll switch to my nose here for a second. When you are looking at a nose, and noses are different depending on the person, often you will see a little bit of the nostril. You'll see a little bit of the sort of flat of the nose, this part here, and then you'll see a little bit more, depending on the angle, right? So like depending on how much of nostril you might see. Right? So let me go ahead and I'll switch back to my top-down camera. Y'all, here we go. All right, so looking at this, I've got kind of like a little bottom of the nose and maybe a little bit of a nostril, and then it somehow kind of comes up this way. Now, I feel like my nose is a little bit more triangular with a round part in the front, but it depends on the nose, right? People have different shaped noses. But generally speaking, what you will see when you're looking at the nose face on is you might see a little bit of a dark line around this bottom, delineating. The only place where you do see firm edges is maybe at the bottom, describing the bottom of the nose, and then a little bit of that nostril. And then right below the nose, so the bottom of the nose is actually in shadow, right? If the light's coming from above. So looking at the nose, this part might be in shadow, or one side of the nose might be more lit than the other side. So if the light is coming again from this side of the nose would be a little bit lighter. And I'm just going to kind of blend it in a little bit here. So let's make a little bit of, it's all about how the light falls in relationship to the nose. So having a little bit of that tone down is going to really help. And it's really a soft blend, right? So that's the key here. And then depending on the nose and the shape of the nose, you might actually have like a highlight going down the middle of it. Maybe a little bit of it is landing on that button at the end, depends on the nose. And then the nose also will cast a shadow below, right? So there might be a little bit of a darkness right below the nose on the lip. All right. Next up, lips. So here, let's fix this girl's nose. Let's fix her nose here. Get her a nose job. So I maybe made this come out a little bit too far. I'm really not changing her proportions. I'm just kind of showing you how much it changes when you blend it a little bit and how much it changes when you soften it a little bit, right? Like this isn't even a real face. This is just like a cartoon face, but you can see how much more three-dimensional it feels with a little bit of that, right? And the cheekbone comes out a little bit, so it's usually lighter right here and then darker below it, right below the cheekbone. And this fine charcoal just blends like a dream. So next up we have our mouth. So let's come over to the mouth zone. Now, if you look at a mouth from the side, I'm going to rotate my paper. These are not a connected face pieces over here. They're just doing their own thing. So if you look at a mouth, you often will see a mouth. I'll do this like a side view, right? So we've got the nose, right? Here's our nose from the side, and maybe you've got like your guys. What's this part of the nose? Is this the like Medusa? What is this? Your little bit between your nose, and mouth, this area. Someone knows the official names for all the piercings in this class. I would bet money.
So is it the one right like in between the nose and the mouth, right?
Right here. Here's your beautiful.
The philtrum, I believe.
The philtrum. Thank you. Yes. All right. Appreciate it. So this is your nose. This is your profile. This is maybe he doesn't have a very good nose here. Let's give him more nose. All right. So when the light is coming from above, we have this area casting a shadow. This area is in shadow. This area right here, highlight. because this nose is casting a shadow right below the nose. But the thing that happens with the lip is that because this top lip is bending inward, it actually ends up in shadow, whereas the bottom lip ends up in highlight. And then right below the lip is back in shadow again, right? Now, the lip has got some of its own pigmentation, so it might not be, again, it's not paper white. It's just a shade lighter, right? So it might be that you do see some tone here, but it's a lighter tone. The light is going to be hitting that bottom lip, and less light will be hitting that top lip. And you do actually see the line in between the lips. So just be careful here. Like right below the lip is a shadow. Just think about like the sort of up and downs of the face. Where is it casting a shadow? Where is it not casting a shadow, right? So right below the nose is a shadow. Anywhere where there's something overhanging it, right? The top lip is in shadow. The bottom lip is in highlight. And then right below the lip is another shadow. So let's do a pair of lips here. Let's rotate this. So looking at these lips, you might start out with kind of drawing out really lightly. Maybe you have like a strong Cupid's bow, right? So let's look at these lips here. Right, so this is a pair of lips. And the thing to do here is imagine you're observing these lips. These are all hypothetical lips. And so all of this kind of fails when you're looking at a real person because you're looking at their specific lips, right? But I'm going to go ahead and show you what I mean here. And you notice that the way I'm doing this is not going to leave any outline around the lips, right? There's going to be no outline. So the top lip is dark. Now, bottom lip has some tone on it, right? Like the lip does have its own color. So I'm going to give it a little bit of color here. And so you can see how that diminishes the outline effect that we really want to stay clear of. And then noticing that you do actually see often, if the mouth is closed, you may see a little bit of the line between the lips, and you may also see the shadow right below the lip, right? So it's often like right here, you might see just a little bit of shadow. And then keep in mind that it's all the skin around the mouth has to have its own tone. And that's really the thing that's going to give you the most kind of interest here. And the most like dimension, right? So like coming in here, and I may have made this bottom lip a little bit too dark, right? Too light. It is in highlight. It needs to be lighter than the top lip, but it doesn't need to be quite so light. Let's darken it up a little bit, and let's kind of give us a little more contrast here. So this is starting to look like lip. Sometimes this line is straight across. Sometimes the line gets a little bit thicker right here in the middle, depending on the sort of shape of that upper lip, right? It can kind of change. And then the other thing that can happen here is you might actually have a little bit of highlight, right? Where the lower lip kind of pouts out a little bit, you know? So thinking about like where those highlights are. And this is just sort of standard rules. So let's come back to our girl. Let's fix her mouth. All right, so let's tone her. I'll leave one side of her like Picasso and one side of her. And so I made her mouth a little bit too wide, right? Because it needs to go right underneath, right? So let's bring that together. And let's lighten this up a little bit. Just kind of giving myself some tone there to work with. And all of a sudden she has a lot more dimension, you know? It's not perfect because this is not an observation. This is me just sort of like laying these rules down on the face, right? Another thing that comes up really often in these classes is the hair, right? Again, we're thinking about the hair, we're not thinking about it as strands. So let's give her some strands. And let's check the proportions on her because she might actually be really off here. So if this is the difference between her mouth and her chin, her head is actually off the page, right? So I need to make sure that the hair, even if she's cropped off the page, that that would be the top of her head right there. So we want to make sure that, like, I may have made her hairline a little bit too low. I think I did. Girlfriend, you're a hot mess. All right. So when you are drawing in hair, just keep in mind that it is actually shapes, right? So you want to think about the hair as if it were shapes and not strands. So that's really important. I guess her ear is covered up. That's fine. Right? All of a sudden we have a little bit more dimension. So this is the most beautiful drawing, but hopefully that can kind of convey a little bit more of that idea. So questions so far? So if you look at my face now, and I'm just going to hold my face, I can't hold my face still, but I'll try. You can actually see that the top lip is darker. You can actually see there's a little shadow underneath my lip. Now, my lighting is like really like flood lighting, so it's not giving me any harsh shadows, which is very flattering, but not very illuminative about the shadows of the face. But you can see there's a little shadow below my lip. There is a line between the two. There's like actually a dark line. And you can see that the bottom of the nose is deeper. When I take my glasses off, you can actually see the sort of shape of the shadows, right? You can see how the curve of the eyelid wraps around the eye. And you can also see how the brow casts a shadow down into this area, right? So underneath the eye, we have a shadow. Sort of here in the brow area, we have a shadow. Now, my light's coming from this way, right? And so I have, it's a little bit different on one side to the other because the light source is coming from one side. So if I turn a little bit more like this, you can see how the lights change depending on how they land on that face. So we are at a crossroads. Do you want me to draw a real face and then we can break? Do you guys want me to actually draw like one of you? Do you have a volunteer? I could actually just do one where I draw a real face and I won't take too long with it. We'll see if it looks like you. Do we have a volunteer? A brave soul, and I'll draw their face. Emma, Emma, lovely. Yes. All right. So I'm gonna actually, I'm gonna pin your video. And so Emma's over here, and I'm gonna switch to my top-down view. I'm not going to spotlight it because I want you to be able to see both Emma's face and the drawing. Thank you, Emma. I appreciate it. I'm going to pin you so that I can see you big. And so that will help me. But you guys can kind of move between the two, whatever gives you the best view. So looking at Emma's face, thank you, Emma.
You want me to look in a specific direction?
Mostly look at the camera. Like, that's good. Beautiful. You have a beautiful face, okay. Emma. Thank you. So you're sitting next to a window and she has like a strong light coming from one side. So you can see that when I look at Emma's face that I have light on hitting one side stronger than the other. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start laying down the face. I'm going to kind of like, let's go ahead and put down some proportions. Emma, if this picture turns out good, I'm going to give it to you as a gift. It's yours. I'll take a photograph of it and send it to you. If it turns out bad, we can pretend like it never happened. All right. So
I'll take it anyways.
So I'm going to go ahead and I'm laying out really lightly the sort of outline of the face. And some faces are a little bit rounder and some faces are a little bit longer. Emma, I think your face is kind of in the middle, right? It's not particularly, it's kind of like just a little ovally. It's good. She's sitting up, so I do see a little bit of her neck. And this is the sort of round, like when we think about the skull, this is the round part of where the top part is, and then this is the jaw coming down. So I'm really loosely laying out that face, right? Now, if this is the skull, and this is the sort of base, I want to figure out where that middle is, right? So like this is where your eyes are, right here. And I hope you can see my drawing too, Emma, while we do this. So this is where your eyes are. And then coming down from that, so let's if we divide this, we could even divide it into 5 little units and kind of go from that. But I think that can be a little bit distracting. So I'm going to start out by just kind of like placing your rough features here. And we've got now notice also that the top of the ear, if you see the ear, it kind of is part of that same line, right? So if this line here is sort of curved a little bit, right, because we're wrapping around the skull, you can actually see that the ear comes up to where the eye is, right? So there is a relationship between the ear and the eye. Even if you can't see the ear, it's helpful to know where it is. And then coming down here, we have our nose and mouth. Thank you. I'm so grateful, Emma. Thank you. So we've got our mouth. And you want to think about, like, part of this is just like using those skills of observation to start placing these on the page, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and get you some eyebrows here. Now, this part here is generally the sort of brow of the face. And then over here is kind of where it comes down a little bit more for like the temples, sideburn area. We're gonna think about this. And so the hair has a little bit of volume. It's not like totally tight down onto the skull, right? So there's a little bit of floof that comes up with the hair. And there's a little bit of wave here. So there's like a little bit of wave, and then it comes down near the brow. You're being great. You're great, Emma. And so looking here, I do have a sort of strong shadow on one side of the nose. And I actually can see both of your nostrils, but one of them is a little darker than the other. So I'm going to kind of, I can see a little bit here, but it's got a lot of light on it. And then this one here is in deep shadow. And the shadow, because the light's coming from the side, the shadow under your nose is a little bit off to the side, which is fine. So let's give you some eyes. This is, again, like with all my drawings, I like to move around the page. And even though this eye is in bright light, it still is wrapping around that eyeball, right? So, and then coming over here. You can see how her eyelid crops through the top of the iris, right? I think I maybe made this eye here a little bit more open than the other one. So let's bring the lid down a little bit. This is a relaxed face pose. This is okay. And over here, we actually see a little bit more of the sort of contour of that. So I'm going to start shading in what we have, and then I can refine it a little bit. So I see a deep shadow coming up here, right? And then I also see a deeper shadow on this side of the face. And I don't want to forget the lips here. So we do have some lips. There's a little Cupid's bow. And the bottom lip is lighter. So I'm actually going to go ahead and erase a little bit of color off the bottom lip and deepen up the top lip. And I'm just using my finger to blend. So if you look at the chin, you see there's like a little bit of a shadow here. It's actually pretty subtle because you're so well lit. So this is a really subtle shadow. And then the actual top of the chin is actually lighter. So this area is a little bit lighter because once you're out of the under the mouth region, then it's catching the light again. And then over here, we have a little bit of, I think I maybe ended your nose too early. So you can, there we go. I don't know, maybe is this your hair back here, or is this like headphones? It's your hair, it's good, it's good. All right, we're good. So thinking about the shape of that brow, it kind of, comes up and then has a little bit of an angle here at the edge. And we can actually see a couple of creases right above her eyelid that follow the curve of that like round shape underneath the eyelid, right? And then because of that strong light, this side actually comes back into deep shadow. So we're gonna kind of deepen the shadows on this side of the face, and where those shadows end actually describe a good portion of that face. Now I'm going to go ahead and erase some of this like line that I put down the middle of your face that I don't think is really enhancing quality of the drawing anymore. And deepen in those irises, right? So this is why I like the Vine charcoal. Ooh, let me just break the Vine charcoal. For this, now, I do see a little bit of shadow on this side of the face. This is very glam, Emma. This is a very glam face. Sometimes you'll see a little bit of like dimple. Sometimes you'll see a little bit of a line, right, like underneath, coming from the nose downward. And you want to be gentle about that line because I think that it can make people look old. So just be really careful about any lines that you see coming down this way. Like they might be there, but just be gentle about them, right? And there we go. You can see here, all right. And that looks like a face, man. I don't know if it's, I don't know if it's my best, but you can see how we just sort of move that material. It's a real face. You can see how we move that material around. Now, Emma, you don't have any like locks of hair breaking away from the rest of the face. It's all pretty much pulled back, which is fine. It's a good working studio look. But if there is like a little strand that breaks free, that's where you would draw an individual hair instead of like the big block of hair, right? I don't actually see any strands on Emma's head. I just see the sort of shape of the shadow. All right. So thank you very much. Here, I think you have a little bit more hair. Just a little bit. There we go. We can measure this. This is halfway to the chin. We can follow down from the eyes to this. We can measure this distance to the eye, the eye, the eye, the eye. So that those measurements are all pretty good. So there we are. That's my that's my face. Thank you so much, everyone. You guys are real supportive. Yay!